I have this really like weird anxiety in like the base of my being that after today's video, people are going to accuse me of being a communist. Just thought I'd get that out there. Um, but let's dive in. If you're like me, then the idea of Sabbath might be a bit complicated. And it's complicated for a lot of reasons. For those of you who might not know, Sabbath is a holy day as written in the Judeo Christian scriptures. It happens once a week, and it's meant to be a day of rest, a day where you don't produce anything or work towards anything, but you are meant to just rest, to trust in the provision of God. Now, those who practice Judaism, they traditionally observe Sabbath from Friday night to Saturday night, one full 24-hour period, while Christians generally do it on Sundays. However, like I said, Sabbath can get complicated. And one of the reasons it's complicated is probably that if you were raised in the Christian church, especially the Christian church in the United States, then Sabbath most likely wasn't talked about much. Sure. Like every now and then, the pastor might have a sermon on Sabbath, and it would probably consist of reading the creation story in the book of Genesis when God rested on the seventh day. All fine and good, but that's about it as far as a lot of talking about the Sabbath goes for a lot of people. Not to mention that if you're like me and you had very conservative Christian or Jewish friends growing up, then Sabbath could even seem harmful. I had a Christian friend growing up who told me that on Sundays nothing was allowed except going to church and eating. She and her siblings had to get their homework done on Saturday. They couldn't go to friends' houses, they couldn't watch TV. There were no electronics allowed at all, actually. Any activity that they would do had to be Jesus related. You want to read, it could only be the Bible or a Jesus related book. You wanted to play a game, it had to be a board game because for some reason physical active games weren't Sabbathy enough. And the board games also, again, had to be Bible related. Things like that. And I remember she told me how she dreaded Sundays because it was just a whole day of agonizing waiting. Time seemed to slow, and she would just wait for it to be done, and it ruined the whole weekend because Saturday would just be this jam-packed day trying to get all the stuff done, and then Sunday was just a full day of boredom. And with school and everything that school entailed, she just had so little time to be with friends or to goof around or to play or just have fun. And people wonder why so many people have a hard time with Christianity. But Sabbath confusion doesn't really end there, though, because Sabbath is just, well, hey, it isn't really Sabbath more of an Old Testament thing? And, it's very Jewish, and we're Christians, and didn't Jesus do away with some of those Old Testament laws and practices? And so we don't really have to do Sabbath, right? Not to mention that isn't there that Bible verse about how Jesus said humankind was not made for Sabbath, but Sabbath was made for humankind? That kind of seems to be pointing to how Sabbath isn't really all that important. Plus, who has time for Sabbath anyways? I mean, we go to work or we go to school 5 days a week. We have after school activities. Our kids have after school activities. We have book club or PTA meetings or things going on in our families or our friends or our communities or what have you. There's just always something to be doing. Who has time to just take a day? If anything, we don't have a day off we can give. And in fact, I think some of us would argue that we need more time. We need one more day to get all this stuff done. We need more chances to make money, not less. So all of this kind of makes up several good reasons not to practice Sabbaths, valid reasons to not practice Sabbath. But I remember a podcast I was listening to a while ago. The guest on the podcast asked us, the listeners, where would you be in 5 years? Will you be more joyful, more energized, more alive? Or will you be more bitter and burned up and burnt out by life? And this question haunted me a little bit because I don't believe that life is just made to survive. I don't think we're supposed to simply grit our teeth, put our heads down, and just wait until it's over when it comes to living our lives. I personally, I want to thrive. I believe we are meant to thrive. So the podcast host asked the guest, so what can we do to be healthier 5 years down the road? And the guest responded, have you heard about Sabbath? In Scripture, the idea of Sabbath evolved over time. The commandment was given to the Jewish people after they had been freed out of slavery by God. God had rescued these chosen people, had led them out of Egypt and into the desert, but this seemed to only free them physically. Freeing them spiritually seemed to be harder. After these cycles of trauma had lasted for generations, that old way of life had become so ingrained in them. So after generation and generation of living as slaves, which in that day and age was essentially to be less than human, God had to try and show these people how to be human again. And to reprogram their hearts, God had given them a new command, one that needed absolute and unwavering obedience. Take a day off. Take a day off. Stop slaving away at your tasks and remember that you're free now. And this story was rooted in their own creation myth, in which God creates the world in 6 days and then rests on the seventh. Again, it elicits that cheesy cliche point that pastors would bring up in church. It's like God is saying, if I, the creator of everything, the breath of life, the engine that is propelling this whole journey forward, for every particle that makes up this entire universe, if I, who endlessly creates, needs to stop and take a nap, what makes you think that you don't? And of course, as time went on, they took that liberating, beautiful calling, that reminder that they are free human beings, and that they too should be able to take a moment and bask in the beauty of the world around them. And they twisted it. They bastardized it. They made it this legalistic nightmare where you had to be scared about being caught doing work, or you were going to be labeled a sinner, a heathen. The religious rulers had eventually turned this amazing thing into just another tool that they could use to hold over people and split the world into the haves and the have-nots. So, enter Jesus. We read in the book of Mark, chapter 2, verses 23 through 28, one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. And the Pharisees, or the religious leaders, said to him, look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? And Jesus said to them, have you never read what David did when he was in need and was hungry? He and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for any but the priests to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him. And Jesus said to them, the Sabbath was made for humankind, not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. This is the word of the Lord. You aren't made for Sabbath. The Sabbath is made for you. Now, like I already said, this is a verse used a lot to sort of show that Jesus was doing away with the Sabbath. It's thrown around a lot when people want to do work on a Sunday. And I'm not here to say that, no, you got it wrong. Jesus wasn't doing away with the Sabbath. In fact, Jesus was a stark defender of it. But I'm also not here to tell you that Jesus wasn't saying that. What I'm saying is that there is nuance here. Sabbath is a gift. Rest is like a present wrapped under the tree for you since the beginning of the cosmos, and you can argue about laws and debate about rules, but who argues and debates over a presence? A presence. Sabbath was given for our liberation, for our humanity and our souls, and all you need to do is open the gift. So why don't we? What keeps us from opening this gift? I would like to put forward that it's something we all feel, but most of us don't know how to talk about. 3 years ago, I noticed this thing was being talked about a lot and being written about. People would debate it on TV, and every writer and journalist and intellectual and academic seemed to have an opinion. The economy. And because captions in my voice might not make it clear as I'm talking, I'm using a capital E for the economy. It's the economy. Everyone was talking about it. What toll was the pandemic having on the economy? How long can we not have people return to work for the sake of the economy? During this time, a Christian web developer noticed how much people were talking and debating and discussing the economy, how the economy was shaping our words, our thoughts, our discourse as a world. And so he turned to Jesus's words. You cannot serve both God and money. Now, the ancient Greek word for money is the word mammon. And mammon doesn't actually just refer to money as an object, as a thing, but more so the effect that money has on us, the hold money can have on us, how we can hoard money, how we grasp it, how we use it to keep us safe. That's mammon. So noticing this web developer made a plugin for your internet browser, which simply took all references to the economy on your screen and swapped it instead to say Lord Mammon. And this led to truly incredible article titles like, we all have to work together to revive Lord Mammon and stop COVID or save Lord Mammon. We can do both. And unfortunately, I looked really hard because I wanted to post a link with the plugin down below. I couldn't find it anymore. I did see a Reddit post that the plugin was flagged and under review, and I'm guessing that the developer either didn't fight to keep it or it was, permanently taken down for some reason. Probably, Lord Mammon didn't like being outed and called out like that. But it might seem silly. I mean, it is silly, but it was getting at something. By swapping the economy for Lord Mammon, the developer was revealing the absurdity of our cultural idols. How focused we are on another god. Maybe it's a small g god, but it's a god nonetheless. The ancient Israels would have lived in a world where they believed in powers and principalities. And that might sound like an old King James Version kind of phrasing, but I think it's fitting here. They believed in powers and principalities, unclean spirits, other small g gods who were behind a lot of the way their world worked. And you can call them superstitious and you can call them primitive, but I can't help but think that if we injected just a little bit of that mysticism into the way we saw the world, we would be better off, because I believe that there is power, there is weight behind the actions of most things that we do in the world. As author and speaker Rob Bell says, everything is spiritual, and I've taken that idea to heart. What if the economy isn't just the economy? And you can scoff and you can roll your eyes. You can think of yourself as some advanced, civilized person, but think about the debate we're having over the economy now. It's 3 years later and we haven't really stopped talking about it. We hadn't stopped talking about it since before COVID. But how many workers have gone on strike over safety protocols because of COVID? How many people have protested because of stagnant wages and wage theft and toxic working environments? Frontline workers were threatening to strike all over the country and did strike all over the country because they were forced to work in a pandemic and their bosses refused to follow any safety measures or compensate them for the extra work and the hazardous conditions they were working in. Screenwriters are right now striking because of with streaming services, their industry standards and the contracts that have become outdated, and they are making sense for episodes that they are supposed to be making a living off of. Actors are striking for the same reason. We have auto workers striking because as the US auto industry is continuing to sink, they're being asked to work more and more hours for less and less pay. Make that make sense. Not to mention that workers the world over are seeing new facts and figures that show that if you give workers a shorter working day and a shorter working week, the production and the profit to the companies don't actually lessen. People who are more rested and get to spend more time with their families and friends and loved ones doing what they love to do somehow do the same amount of work as overworked, overtired zombies. So of course you have workers petitioning for 6-hour days and 4-day work weeks. And yet you have these loud voices arguing that we can't do that. It doesn't matter what these statistics show. You have to work 8 or 10 or 12, sometimes even 16 or more hour days, 5 or 6 or even 7 days a week. You just have to. Because if you stop working, then that's just time that isn't going to be used to make a profit for these companies, for these CEOs and other people. And yeah, sure, data says that working less won't actually decrease profit. Blah. But there's no chance to make any potential profits if you aren't working. You hear a lot of people saying things like, if Hollywood doesn't start working again, that's billions of dollars lost in the economy, and that will hurt the economy. So writers and actors who have been streaming, have seen streaming take their income from a livable wage to cents per paycheck, literal cents per paycheck, just need to suck it up for the economy. Auto workers who are losing their benefits, who are being offered less and less of an income while being asked to work more and more to make up for the struggling economy, are being told that they just have to suck it up for the economy. We talk a lot about groups of people sacrificing for the economy, for the good of our nation. And back in the Israelites' day, neighboring countries talked a lot about sacrificing people to their gods for the good of their nation. And I can't help but be left thinking that maybe we're not as civilized as we think we are. Maybe we haven't advanced as much as we thought we have. Maybe we still need to watch out for Lord Mammon. Does this all sound a little too political? Maybe a little too spiritual? Maybe both? But I can't escape the idea that we need to start seeing that everything is spiritual. There is a plethora, a smorgasbord of gods that drive our daily decisions, often without us even knowing how to name them. Like the god of efficiency, who wants you to maximize every minute, be more productive. And the god of hard work, who wants you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, no time for a nap, hustle more. And the god of appearances, who insists that you balance the scales. You better have them over for dinner next time. And you better make sure that the meal is just as good, if not a little bit better. And you best believe that Lord Mammon is always at work, telling us that we have the money, we deserve everything we want the moment we want it. Order that product from Amazon with overnight shipping, regardless of the slave who made the product or the warehouse worker peeing in a bottle to get it to you so fast. Pick up every possible shift and stay late to make as much money as possible. And of course, every business should be open every day. You've got money after all, and it's unfair that you might not be able to buy something one day out of the week when you want to right now. Lord Mammon will not tolerate being told no. The issue is Did the Israelites embrace Sabbath perfectly? Did they rest when there was just so much work to be done? And if they didn't rest, how can we be expected to rest? Because our world is vastly more complicated than theirs. There's global politics and finances and capitalism and imperialism and corporate day jobs and law offices and restaurants and grocery stores and after school clubs and after work clubs and this and that and the other thing. We invented electricity, and now we have light that will shine bright enough that we can still work even when the sun goes down. We have this great, big, vast economy that stretches from person to person, city to city, state to state, country to country, tied and intermingled, and it's always asking us to give more to it, lest it crumbles and throws the world into the next dark age. So what's stopping us from embracing this gift we've been given, embracing rest? What stopped the ancient Israelites? Just about everything in our culture all the time. To reclaim our time, to reclaim Sabbath, will require seeing the day of Sabbath as not just another day off, but we need to learn to see Sabbath as an act of spiritual warfare. And now, like I've said countless times in the past, spiritual warfare might be a little hard to swallow. If you find that phrase charged, triggering, uncomfortable, swap it. Swap it with anything else, something else. We need to see Sabbath as an act of counterculturalism. We need to see spiritual warfare as an act of societal rebellion. In non-religious groups, people have started to understand this kind of idea. There's actually this sort of like anti-grind movement happening on social media right now, which I love and I'm obsessed with. As jobs are asking more and more of people, a meme and a really sort of idealized lifestyle aesthetic has risen up. Usually the memes say something like, stop glamorizing the grind and start glamorizing whatever this is. And then they'll show a picture of something just relaxing, maybe someone relaxing. There's a lot of frog and toad memes showcasing this idea. It's not just Christians, it's not just spiritual people. Everyone is having this sort of awakening that life as it has been going isn't working. The more we work, the more money we make, we're not actually becoming that much safer or better off or freer. The more we give to Lord Mammon, it turns out, the less we are actually getting in return. We need to see Sabbath as spiritual warfare, as countercultural lifestyle, as societal rebellion, because Sabbath makes 1/7 of your week entirely unproductive to Lord Mammon. Sabbath refuses to be efficient, to reward effort, or to try and balance the scales. It refuses to participate in the game created by our modern gods. It is a gift. To quote Marva Dawn, it is a royal waste of time, which is why all the false gods of our modern world are afraid of the Sabbath. It's a threat to them. It doesn't bow to them. It exposes them for the charlatans that they are. It tells the truth that efficiency and hustle and appearances and Lord Mammon or the economy can never be satisfied, and they can never satisfy. They can only take and take from you. They will take your time and your home and your money and your souls, and then they will take our children. And you can think that I'm over exaggerating, but how many kids never see their parents because they're too busy at work? How many youth are crushed because of the expectations of perfection? And how many more will we allow to be sacrificed to depression and anxiety and the opioid epidemic before we repent from this false god and believe the good news? The good news being that Christ is offering you rest. God is offering you rest. The spark, the engine, the creator, these terms and titles that evoke movement and pushing forward and journeying ahead, they're also offering you rest. The Spirit is telling you that you deserve to rest. God is offering you humanity. God is offering you the gift of Sabbath. Now, here's the good part of the good news. There's nothing demanded of you in return. There's nothing you can do to balance the scale. It is grace. Through and through, it is grace. You did nothing to earn it, and you can do nothing to lose it. You can only open it. And as you receive it week after week, month after month, year after year, Sabbath begins to transform us. I can remember a few years ago when I was first living on my own, Mondays would be my day off. And I lived in an area that had a lot of little independently owned shops. And so I would often go walking around my neighborhood and just see what I could find. But I found out really rather quickly that most shops are closed on Mondays. And I can remember thinking and just being a little pissed off about that because I thought to myself, well, I have money. Why won't they open so that they can take my money? And it's not perfect now, and I still have moments where I might be a little pissed off when I find that somewhere I want to be is closed when I'm free. But after a lot of work and a lot of meditating, a lot of time allowing the radical idea of Sabbath to transform me, usually now, after a moment of annoyance, I think to myself, well, I'm glad they're closed. I'm so happy that they get a day to rest. Maybe the shop owners are spending the day with their family. Maybe they're watching their kids' baseball game, Maybe they're just being out and about with their friends. And isn't that so much more important? 30 years from now, that shop owner won't remember me or my purchase or the little bit of money I put into their business, but they might remember the time they spent with their loved ones. They might remember the new relationships that they made or old relationships that were strengthened. They might have a more well-lived life because they allowed themselves to deny the almighty dollar in favor of something that money can't buy. How good would it be to just have a day to tune out? Just plain and simple, undisciplined time to do anything and everything that brings you joy and that you find restful. Go for a walk, to play, to pray if you feel so inclined, to turn off your phone and run a big, bright X in your calendar and just enjoy the day. Now, here's the thing. The thing that I think is probably not talked about a lot when people talk about Sabbath. If you're going to choose to participate in this act of spiritual warfare, of being countercultural, this act of societal rebellion, of not glamorizing the grind, but glamorizing whatever kind of life Frog and Toad are living, then it is probably going to have consequences on your budget, your wallet, your bank account. One less day of work means that much less money or less time you get to have the work get done. Schoolwork, chores, duties, what have you. And for a lot of people, that is simply not an option. You might be on the edge of poverty and you actually need those extra hours to make that extra money because you're living paycheck to paycheck, and a little less means not enough for rent or car payments or food or some other critical need that we all need to survive. And I'm not going to sit here in my privilege and tell you that we all just have to calm down, relax, take a day off. When the truth is that for more and more of us, our work is demanding more from us while giving us less in return. And those bills keep getting bigger while those paychecks are getting smaller. But what I will say is that it's messed up that we live in a world that puts people in this position. And I would argue it's messed up that the way the world is right now, there are tons of people who are willing to fight to keep it exactly this way. And that when you offer them anything else, they'll yell at you and call you naive or foolish. And it sickens me that so many of the people who talk about how just some people have to sacrifice their lives for the greater good of the economy are also people who claim to love and follow Jesus and will talk about peace and love and rest and valuing human life and how Jesus died to be the final sacrifice. And then if you mention how you think everyone deserves to spend time with family and loved ones, and how we all need to allow ourselves to operate as the holy and sacred creations we were intended to be and not work ourselves to death, people will call you a communist who hates America. The point I'm trying to make is that I understand how this concept of Sabbath is literally impossible for people. And I will argue that the fact that it is becoming impossible is a planned action by Lord Mammon and the powers and the principalities, by the man who stands firm against our countercultural societal rebellion. And whenever and however we can, we should all fight against those powers and principalities, that small g God, the man who is trying to lock us back into servitude. But while we fight that good fight, I also know that there are at least some of us who can actually afford taking a day off, a real day off. And what I'm saying now is for you. I have a friend, a pastor in Canada, who he and his wife, when they were newly married, took a day off. They decided to have a real Sabbath. He was in school at the time, working a part-time job. She was working a full-time job. And they worried about the paychecks, the mounting bills, the time that he had to complete his schoolwork while balancing his job. But they also knew that the pace they were living life was just unsustainable. So on Friday evenings, they turned their phones off and they wouldn't engage with anything that felt like work until Saturday night. And what they found out was that with a little bit of intentionality, Sabbath worked perfectly for them. Because they had less money coming in, they were more intentional with it. You know, they spent less, and as time went on, spending less meant that they had less junk and more items that they actually cared about and they saved up for, and that they actually meant more to them. And so they found that they actually had more money than they did before. They also had to be more intentional with their time because they were losing this day to give to the Sabbath. So they spent less time on social media or just browsing Netflix endlessly and aimlessly, and they spent more time doing worthwhile things that mattered more to them. Somehow, over time, less slowly grew into more. They had more. And I remember talking with him about this, and he told me that despite it making absolutely no sense logically on paper with the flow of society, they were more energized, more joyful, more alive than they were 10 years ago. You know, they go to coffee shops and they play cards with their friends. They have long mornings in bed, wrestling and playing with their kids. They walk through the neighborhood. I think the thing that stands out most to me is that I think the particulars are way less important than the spirit of the day. When I say no work, I don't want to get into that territory where you think you're not allowed to push a button on an elevator, or you can't see a friend, or if you're going to play a game, it has to be Jesus themed. You were not made to serve the Sabbath. Sabbath was made to serve you. So let it serve you. Let it work for you. However it works for you, do it that way. So I don't know you, obviously. I'm talking to a camera right now. I don't know what your situation is that you find yourself. You know, perhaps you feel okay in this time. Maybe you feel like you have some time and some energy and focus to spare. And if that's you, thank God. That is a smaller and smaller chunk of us. And so I hope and pray that you recognize your gift and you utilize it. Take advantage of this gift that has been given to you. But this might be a time where you feel like you are running and grinding and burning the candles on both ends. Like I said, that token quote, you feel like not enough butter spread over too much bread. I suspect that's a lot of us. You feel like the old way is no longer working. Like if you keep going at the pace you're going, the whole thing is just going to fall apart. You used to maximize every minute, and now time is slipping away. You used to keep up with the endless to-dos. You've been slowing down. You used to balance the scale and keep up with appearances, but now you feel lopsided. You used to be able to feed Lord Mammon, but now he's taking more and he gives. If you feel like every day is just a repeat of the day before, if you feel like you can't hear your soul anymore, if you feel like butter stretched over too much toast, God has a gift for you, the beautiful gift of Sabbath, wrapped and waiting to be opened. That's what I got for you today. I hope this was beneficial. Hope this sparked something good. Like I've said in so many videos, and I'm always going to say, the point of these videos is not to be the final word, but to be the first word. I don't want to tell you what to think or how to live, but I want to put a spark in your brain that gets you thinking, gets you engaged, and seeing if this applies to you. And if this does apply to you, if there's anything here that does spark in your mind or in your brain, I would love to hear from you. Comment down below, your thoughts, or if you want to talk a little bit more privately, you can DM me on Instagram at Brennan Johnson. Let's talk. I just want to engage in meaningful conversation. I hate doing the whole YouTubery thing, but hey, liking, subscribing really helps out the channel. Get that video out there. If you feel so inclined to share, that would be great. Blah, I hate that. But thank you all so much. See you again soon. Grace, peace. Cheers.